Hello everyone, my name is Victor. I am the Occult Technician, and this is Mind War, Season 6, Episode 5. Welcome back to Mind War, folks. I appreciate you being here. You may be asking yourself, Victor, where exactly is here? Because you don't look like you are in the Mind War studios, and you'd be correct. Today, I am being temporarily relocated to the Mind War Manor, home of Mother and Father Mind War. As you know, those of you that have been following along, my mother is currently in the late stages of her battle with cancer. And so I'm taking my time to be here with her, to care for her and my father. She's upstairs resting comfortably right now, and Father is fast asleep as it just struck midnight here in the Mind War Manor. It is freezing cold here. It's in the single digits. I'm glad to be here. Difficult circumstances, but I feel like I am reconnecting with my parents in a way that I haven't in a long time, and that's really good. And that's a good thing. It's just sad that it's, this difficult time is what has brought us together. So, with that being said, me being here in this situation and continuing this podcast, I want you to understand that once you make a deal the way that I did, and you'll see and learn more about this when we get into the spiritual aspects of my work, there is no going back. There is no stopping. You have to keep going, because once you make a commitment, you cannot renege on it. You have to keep going, okay? And that's what we're doing here today, that despite whatever's going on in the real world, we have to continue this work. And that's exactly what we're doing. So we're going to pick up where we left off in analysis and assessment of the gateway process. This is the DoD report on the gateway experience tapes. We are going to do just one section at a time for these next few episodes until we can get back into the Mind War studios. And of course, these episodes are going to be a little subdued. I won't be yelling and screaming as much as I normally do, expressing my anger and stuff. So bear with me as we do, like I said, sort of subdued episodes, but needless to say, some very interesting things have happened just in the last few days, and I can't wait to share them with you. But first, let's get back to work here on this report. We are at section number 5, called Gateway and Hemi-sync. Now that we have briefly profiled the basic mechanics of the principal techniques for altering or expanding consciousness, which share some of the objectives and or methods employed in the gateway experience, we may proceed to focus on what that technique actually involves. Fundamentally, the gateway experience is a training system designed to bring enhanced strength, focus, and coherence to the amplitude and frequency of brain output between the left and right hemispheres, so as to alter consciousness, moving it outside the physical sphere so as to ultimately escape even the restrictions of time and space. Okay, another giant sentence. So, Lieutenant Colonel Wayne McDonnell, the writer of this report here, he is very correct when he says that fundamentally the gateway experience tapes are a training system, okay? And they are designed to enhance our strength, focus, and coherence of our of our thoughts, of our intuition, of our manifestation, our imagination, our ability to visualize the things that we want, visualize new concepts and find answers that we've talked about this before. When you run into difficulty and you have a situation in your life that you're trying to work on and you just can't seem to find the answer. The answers are often hidden inside, whether it's our mind or our heart, whatever the situation is that we're dealing with, or our gut. We're often clouded by the issues that we have to deal with during the day, right? Going to work, dealing with the home, family, friends, those type of things. They all can stifle us and weigh us down in a way where it stops us from being able to find those answers. And that's what we do. When we get into that hypnotic state, when we get into that state of somnambulance, through the gateway experience tapes, through the enhancements, and then we go into our spiritual work and we're visualizing, we are manifesting, imagining, right? That is, that's why we put all of our worries into the energy conversion box. When we do that, it clears our heart and mind for the answers to come through, okay? The participant then gains access to the various levels of intuitive knowledge which the universe offers. Okay. 100% correct. The intuitive knowledge. We've talked about intuition so much. We have learned some amazing techniques where we actually, our present self can go back in time and implant intuitive thoughts into our mind in the past. That's maybe kind of what we see with deja vu and things like that. The universe does offer various levels of intuitive knowledge. And it's through this work that we start to understand how intuition works, what the different levels are, how we engage with it. And most importantly, this is the most important part, folks, trusting the intuition when it occurs. Because again, we've talked about this before. When you have a successful intuitive event, you trusted your gut and something amazing happened. That's awesome. But those are often few and far between because we normally don't trust ourselves and trust our gut and trust our instincts, right? Normally what we get is the regret of not following our intuition. These are all things that we work on and we strengthen as we go through this training. What differentiates the gateway experience from forms of meditation is that it uses the hemi-sync technique, which is defined in a monograph by Monroe Institute trainer Melissa Yager as a state of consciousness defined when the EEG patterns of both hemispheres are simultaneously equal in amplitude and frequency. So again, we've talked a little bit about the differences between the hemispheres of the brain. The left hemisphere, we're really doing that logical thinking, organizing things, planning things. That is that conscious side of our mind that wants to succeed at things and wants to create projects and be successful with them, where the right side of our brain is more of those animal instincts where we deal with the physical body, where we deal with the restrictions of the physical body because it's tired and hungry and things like that. And the left hemisphere, again, that logical side, it has to take into account the physical. And that can often be very difficult for people. That's where we feel like we're failing because in our mind we say, oh, we should be doing this or that. But our body, it just says, hey, we can't right now, right? Although hemi-sync seems to be rather rare and of only short duration, it ordinarily In Ordinary Human Consciousness, Melissa Yager states that audio techniques developed by Bob Monroe can induce and sustain hemi-sync with the Institute's basic Focus 3 tapes. So what this technician, Melissa Yager here, I believe she is probably working for the Monroe Institute, she's talking about getting into hemi-sync is as early as Focus 3. I mean, Focus 3, you're basically just at the very beginning of starting to relax. You kind of just laid down and closed your eyes, taking a few deep breaths, and started to allow yourself to be calm. I mean, that's Focus 3. So it's interesting how quickly it can begin. She also notes that studies conducted by Elmer and Alice Green at the Menninger Foundation have shown that a subject with 20 years of training in Zen meditation could consistently establish hemi-sync at will, sustaining it for over 15 minutes. Okay, we've talked about this stuff before, right? This idea of 20 years of Zen meditation training with a monk at the top of the hill. We don't have to do that anymore. You know, that's what was recommended to Dr. Monroe or Bob Monroe when he first started having these out-of-body experiences. Maybe that's what, if Jesus was a real guy, maybe that's what he did in those years that we don't really hear about, where he disappeared off to India. Maybe he was out studying meditation, right? But they say here, even with 20 years of training, they can only sustain hemi-sync for over 15 minutes. Yet we listen to these tapes and we are already, almost as amateurs. We're just beginners here. We're getting into the hemi-sync, for 30 minutes, almost 45 minutes, some of these tapes are. It really is amazing what Bob Monroe has been able to do here, him and his team at the Monroe Institute. It's, again, they use those scientific methods in order to help us induce this state of hemi-sync, right? Dr. Stuart Temlow, a psychiatrist and a research associate of the Monroe Institute, reports that in our studies of the effect of the Monroe tape system on brainwaves, we have found that the tapes encourage the focusing of brain energy. It can be measured as with a light bulb in watts into a narrower and narrower frequency band. This focusing of energy is not unlike the yoga concept of one-pointedness, which we may translate in Western terms as single-mindedness. This idea of being single-minded, again, where both halves, both hemispheres of the brain are working together as one, that is single-mindedness. And again, we reach back into more of the Eastern philosophies, maybe more occult and esoteric ideas, but the author here is talking about the yoga concept of one-pointedness. It's what we're doing. Again, one of the things we've talked about before is you have to add all of these things together to get this stuff to work, right? I don't know that you can just do yoga and get this stuff to work. Maybe you can. That's great. Maybe just, sitting crisscross applesauce at the top of a hill and clearing your mind for 20 years. Maybe that does it. I don't know. But I've found through my research that when you combine all of these aspects together, the hemi-sync tapes, the psilocybin and THC enhancements, before I do all of this, I make sure that I stretch and exercise. We've talked about that. It's important to clean your surroundings, eat healthy, and then, you're doing your spiritual work on top of all of this. It's when you put all of these things together, they really start to function. And I think what happens is so many of us, we get caught in that narrow path. We think yoga is the way, or Reiki is the way, or whatever it might be. But again, add them all together And that's when we start to see real success in what we're doing here. So Dr. Temlow goes on to observe that as the individual gets into the tapes beyond focus 3, there is a gradual increase in brain wave size, which is a measure of brain energy or power. So that's pretty interesting that the researchers here, they're saying that as we go deeper into the focus levels, our brain waves increase in size and strength and power. And that's, I mean, what else could we ask for here? We're strengthening our mind. And being here in the Mind War manor, and having spent a considerable amount of time over the last few weeks with Father Mind War, who is dealing with some memory issues, it would be really interesting to see if these tapes help him. Now, I don't know if he's going to be interested in, listening to them. Of course, I'm not going to try to push it on him or anything. But it would really be interesting to see if just even a few of the tapes, he maybe not even go through the whole series, but just listening to a few of them that really get both hemispheres of the brains to light up and sync together. I wonder if that would help. Sometimes we forget to exercise our minds, right? We focus on the body, but we have to exercise our minds as well, and that's what we're doing here. Okay? So that was Section 5, Gateway and Hemi-Sync of the Analysis and Assessment of the Gateway Process, that report from the Department of Defense, written by Lieutenant Colonel Wayne McDonnell. So again, folks, we have a subdued episodes today, so we're just going to move right into our deep dive on Wave 7 Voyager Tape 5 retrieval. So today's episode, we talk about some training that we're going to do during this tape. And then please stay tuned for next week's episode. It gets much more personal. And next week's tape is a real departure from what we've dealt with before. It's very different. But these two tapes definitely are back-to-back listens, right? You're going to listen to Wave 7 Tape 5. When you're done, take a quick break, take your notes, and then you're going to go right into Wave 7 Tape 6. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in the next episode. But we're going to read through what we do here in the tape. And then, this is a little embarrassing, but when we get done, I took some voice notes. So when I got done listening to the tape the other night, normally I write down what I experienced, and I find it very difficult because, again, being on psilocybin, it's very hard to try to write. It almost feels more like you're just channeling. Your hand is just kind of writing for you. And I got the bright idea of, why don't I just open up my voice recorder app on my phone and just talk into it? I wish I would have thought about that from the very first episode. It would have been nice to have some, audio reminders of what the experiences of the tapes were. So if you've listened this whole time, I do apologize that it took us this long to get here, but, make sure you have an audio recorder next to you. It was much easier to record your experience right after it happened, and then instead of trying to write it down. But first, let's read through this, and then we're going to listen to what I recorded the other night. So, Wave 7 Voyager Tape 5 retrieval. The purpose of this exercise is to learn how to assist those in Focus 23, the transitional reality of those who have detached from physical life. So again, we are going to be helping people who have recently passed, and they are stuck maybe in Focus 23, that level for the newcomers, right? It says, now in your special place in Focus 27, Move out into the park itself, onto the walks, gardens, and trees. Ask for help in making a rescue run. Ask now. So again, we're starting out in the park, in the garden, right? We've talked about that before. I think it's kind of like a reception center almost. And we're going to be asking a spirit to help us as we do this. This is a training partner who's going to help us along in this training module here. Okay. And as we read through or listen through my recording, we'll talk a little bit more about that helper. It says, now with this helper beside you, move back to focus 23. Back to focus 23. So again, in focus 27 is where we get into that garden. That's where we ask for assistance for a spirit to come help us as we go through this training. And now we're moving back downwards into focus 23. Very interesting, right? It takes a lot of work to get into focus 27, but now we move one step down. It says, now in focus 23, select a person newly arrived to focus 23. Do this with the one beside you helping you. Begin your selection now. So the narrator tells us, with you and your helper, you're going to choose someone who has recently passed away. You're going to find their spirit, and you're going to help them move forward, move out of focus 23. It says, now that you've made your selection, begin to escort the newcomer back to the reception center, the way station of focus 27. Do this with the help of the friend beside you. Okay. It says, begin your move to the reception center in focus 27 now. Now in focus 27 in the park. And at the center way station, ask your friend to move the newcomer to someone who can provide the best assistance. So again, now we're asking our helper to, once you get to this garden, this reception center, our helper is with us. The newly passed away spirit, we've helped them make it from focus 23 up into focus 27, right? And so now we get to this reception center, this garden. The three of us are there, and we say, is there anyone here that could help guide this newly passed spirit, right? And once they have been cared for, it says, say goodbye to the newcomer and add the warm friendship. Move back to your special place, relax, and remember in detail the action you have taken. Okay, so, and then from there, again, it is a long countdown from from focus 27 back to waking up. So enjoy those countdowns. Those are always my favorite part of the tape. And so now we're going to listen through the voice recording that I made. This was just a few days ago. At 2 a.m. I was up very late doing this work. And we're going to listen through it. Hopefully this audio will come in well. And we may stop it and do some commentary along the way. So let's listen together. The narrator instructed us to go to focus 27. I counted from 1 to 27 in my mind, between each number taking a deep breath and saying my mother's name so I can. So as we were, as I was counting in my mind from 1 to 27, so basically that's the best way to get into the different focus levels. You're just slowly in your mind, after the narrator says, I'll meet you in focus 27, you just slowly start counting, right? And with each number that you count, you're taking in a deep breath, you're holding it, you're releasing it. Again, it's that breath work, visualization, you're visualizing the numbers. In between each number, instead of saying our affirmation, we kind of did that earlier, I was just saying my mother's name in my mind over and over, because my goal was really to focus on her during these 2 tapes.
Focus on her. Once I got to the number 27, I followed the narrator's instructions and basically pled my case for assistance on how to get training and learn how to assist people to move forward into the next life and move to the resource center or the way station, the garden that we talked about before.
So once in Focus 27, again, where the narrator was asking for a helper, the narrator says, go ahead now and ask for a helper to come help you. And it's in this state, it was at this point where I was saying, okay, the reason that I'm here is that my mother is upstairs. She is in the end stages of her cancer battle. She is still with us, but I want to do everything that I can to kind of reach out and learn how to help her when the time is right. Okay? I was very honest in that, and that's what you need to do too. Because again, this is all happening in your mind. You're having a conversation with yourself. No better time to be honest and ask exactly what you want and be very straightforward, okay? Because you're asking yourself, right? And that's where you get the permission. That's where you give permission to yourself to do the things that you need to do in your life to be successful, okay?
Then the narrator introduced me to a helper who did not really identify themselves. They were just kind of black, but I could feel their presence. Nothing scary. They were very welcoming and kind. And the narrator instructed us to find a new spirit.
Okay, so the helper. Again, once we reach the garden, we're supposed to ask for a helper to assist us in this training session, right? And so the helper that I worked with was, again, nothing really visual. It was more just a sense that something or someone was there with me. Warm, loving, caring, kind. Nothing scary about it whatsoever. But you could kind of just feel them there. To me, they were just kind of on my left-hand side. On my left side is where this helper was. And maybe a black silhouette a little bit, but again, not really a visual thing. It was more just this feeling of, someone or this spirit is here helping me.
Who was needing assistance moving forward. And when he said that, I saw in my mind what looked like a dandelion that was ready to blow all the seeds. It was a white and fluffy, but it was like geometric patterns. And that was the spirit.
Okay, so when the narrator tells us, okay, your helper is with you, and now you need to go back to Focus 23 and find a spirit that you can assist. And when this happened, the visual form that the spirit took, again, was like a dandelion when it's real white and fluffy, and you can blow on it and all the seeds will float off. The spirit looked like that, floating out in the darkness, but not necessarily like the dandelion itself, but more almost like a geometric kind of mathematical version of it. Again, those fractals, a lot of that same kind of visualization you see in those videos where they try to show you like what a DMT trip looks or something like that, a lot of these geometric kind of psychedelic looking things, but it's not nearly as intense as these videos or a movie or something that's trying to describe it. You're still in the darkness. And when you start to see these things, they're very minute in front of you often, right? It's often they're just floating out in the darkness. The light can get very bright and intense. We've talked about that countless times. But also there is a very subtle and subdued visualization pattern. You're going to almost be squinting with your third eye to see these things.
The only name that I received was Keith, and so we helped Keith, and to start, we had to climb a tall...
Okay, so the spirit that I found, he said his name was Keith. That's all I got. I didn't ask anymore. I thought it was strange. But Keith, if you're, well, obviously you're not with us anymore. But that's who I found. I'm not trying to figure out who this person was, nothing like that. That's not what I'm interested in. It just happened to be that the spirit, the soul of the person that I was helping just happened to be named Keith. And now I describe a little bit about how we had to move forward.
White mountain, but it wasn't like cold and covered in snow and made from rock. It was soft and warm like white fleece, which of course was the type of blanket I was wearing.
So when the helper and I first met Keith, again, we were in Focus 23, and now we had to move up into Focus 27 and move him from 23, where he was kind of, he was a newcomer, not necessarily lost, but maybe a little confused about where he was. And we said, okay, we're going to guide you to the reception center. And to get there, the very first thing, it felt like we were climbing up this mountain, right? It was soft and warm and white, exactly like the white fleece blanket that I was laying under. But we were climbing up this mountain for a long time, the three of us. And then when we got to the top...
So we climbed to the top of the mountain. And as soon as we reached the top, the three of us, at first I thought it was going to be like a rocket ship taking off from the top of the mountain. But instead it was just gently floating upwards. And as we moved upwards, I can't say exactly I knew where we went. It seems like there were twists and turns.
So once we reached the top of the mountain, at first I thought it would kind of be like a spaceship feeling like we felt before, where we would kind of take off, right? But instead it was like, as soon as we reached the top, it was almost like we just jumped up in the air and just never came down. We just kept floating upwards. Very gentle, very soft. But there were some twists and turns. I feel like there was almost like 90-degree turns, like we maybe ran into barriers or something that we had to go around. The helper was really guiding, Keith and I, right? So again, I don't know exactly how we got to the reception center. There were some twists and turns, but that's ultimately where we arrived.
But we eventually ended up to the garden, to that reception center, that waiting center, right? And I had difficulty seeing it in the last tapes, but this tape, I saw just a small fraction of it extremely clearly. It was just about 10 to 15 feet of the path and the manicured shrubs that the narrator talked about in past tapes. It was so crystal clear. It's just as if I was looking down and I could see just this little path. It was just kind of like golden warm sand, and there was just short shrubs that were maybe 2 feet tall and 2 feet wide, and just kind of these paths. And I didn't see much else. It was all just black around it, but they were so crystal clear. But much like the dandelion flower, they were made out of these kind of geometric shapes and very bright and brilliant.
Okay, so for the first time, I was able to really see the garden the way that we were supposed to. And it was, like we've talked about in other tapes where there were strong visuals. Okay, we we talked about it in different tapes, a very strong visual events that occurred while listening to the tapes, and this was a perfect example of that. So before me, just kind of on my right side, I saw just about 15 feet of this path. Just like golden, soft, warm sand was the path. And kind of creating the pathway were some shrubs, just very small. It was very clear. It looked very real, but again, with that kind of geometric shapes, with that kind of fractal shapes, that kind of psychedelic look to it. They didn't quite look real, but they were very brilliant, and everything was kind of shining and just a little different than reality, just a little enhanced, if you will. It was very beautiful. And it was interesting because, if you visualize a path in front of you for about 15 feet and you're kind of looking down at it, but then there's nothing else. Everything else was just black. I didn't see off into the forest or see out towards, a waterfall or a stream or anything like that. It was just that little piece of path, but everything else around me was just pitch black. It was like watching a video game render, right? If you're a character and you're walking through a video game and everything kind of just looks foggy and blurry, and then out of all that fog and blur, the scene starts to build. It starts to render itself. That's what it felt like. Okay. Very cool. Very clear. This was that first time really seeing the garden for what it truly is.
And that's what I knew. I said, okay, this must be the reception center that they talked about before. In the last tape, I had only been able to find the log that Nate and I used to sit on. But here, this was something different. This was someplace different. And so, as soon as we get there, the narrator said, okay, it's time to go. So I left Keith and the helper. And as I floated downwards, the garden started to appear more. It's like I could see more and more, and I felt like I saw people standing there, but not just their silhouettes, like real looking people. It looked much more clear. And then as I floated away, it kind of...
Okay, so the narrator, basically says, okay, we've accomplished our goal. Again, this was the training session. My goal, make it to Focus 27, the garden, the reception center. Meet the helper. We met the helper. They escorted us back to Focus 23, where we find the spirits of people who have recently passed away. We met Keith, someone who had recently passed. I don't know who he is. Not interested. That's not the purpose here. We met Keith, and then we went back up into Focus 27. We escorted him to the reception center, to the garden. This is the training that we're doing. Once we made it to the reception center, we handed him off to one of the spirits that were there, and the narrator, AJ Honeycutt, tells us that it's time to go. You can leave the reception center now. And so now, that little piece of path that I saw before me, now as I start walking backwards, now the scene starts to grow. It starts to evolve and appear in front of me. And now I see the forest starting to grow around it. And the structures like a pergola or a gazebo or whatever, an awning, whatever you want to call it. And I see Keith standing there, and I see the helper standing there, and I see the person or the spirit who came to assist. And now they're there in full color, in full crystal clear. Now it looks like a dream. No longer is it black silhouette shapes or the purple fractal silhouettes with white brilliant outlines, right? No longer is it just dark shadow people who you just kind of feel their essence near you. Now, as I'm floating away, it was this beautiful picture. It was like from a movie or a television or something, right? You see the people standing there. They're waving goodbye to me as I'm floating downwards. It was honestly a little cheesy. It was kind of silly. I was like, this is like a Hallmark movie. What is this? Right? But it was very beautiful, and it was perfect, and it was exactly what we were supposed to be doing. This is the goal of the training session that we're in with Wave 7 Voyager Tape 5 Retrieval. It's a culmination of the work that we've done here in Wave 7. It's a departure from the waves of the past. We've definitely moved into new territory here. We're moving away from that self-help, and now we're helping others. But like I said before, one of the best ways to do self-help is to help others, right? And ultimately, like we've talked about before, whether the inevitable occurs with Mother Mind War before this series ends, or whether she stays with us in physical form for the next few months and I have to help her at a later date, it doesn't matter. But what I am doing now is I am training to help her. And I have a real difficult time thinking that for the last 9 months I've been training to get to this point today. 9 months ago when I started this, 3 years ago almost, when I started this work and started listening to the tapes for the very first time, I didn't know my mother was going to get sick. I had no idea. But here we are. For 9 months, we've been coming down here, week after week, making these episodes, sharing our stories together. And now when we get to waves 6, 7, and 8, the waves that I didn't really fully listen to my first go-round. Now we move from self-help to moving people, to helping people who have recently passed away move into that reception center, move on in their spiritual journey that comes after we pass. And it just happens to be the exact time that my mother gets sick and is facing the inevitable. I find it very hard that that's just a coincidence. I don't think it is. I think there are spiritual forces working right now in my life that are beyond anything I've ever experienced before. And I hope that through your use of the Gateway Experience tapes in combination with your spiritual work, I hope these same type of things are happening to you. It's very powerful. It's calming. And again, I think all of this is honestly going to be part of the grieving process. Ultimately, all of this is just happening in our minds. It's all just our imagination. But, it's very hard to calculate how much our imagination and our manifestation and our intuition truly affects reality. And that's what we're trying to figure out. We are trying to break that barrier between imagination and reality. And I think we're making some beautiful headway here. I think we have found ourselves on a path that as we go through all this, I'm going to do my very best to continue this work and share with you all of the stuff that we're doing, all of the stuff that we're going through here. in order to help you on your journey, right? So let's finish up. We just got a few more seconds here. Let's see what else I had to say. I don't think much.
Disappeared, and then the narrator walked me back to wake up.
And that was it. So after we say goodbye to the helper and we found someone to assist Keith, our recently departed spirit, we floated away from the garden, from the reception center, and the narrator walked us back down to 1. Again, it's that long walk from 27 back to 1. And then we woke up, and I took just a few moments before I dove right back into Wave 7, Tape 6. And we're going to talk about that in the next episode. And I tell you, folks, the next tape was very different, and I can't wait to share that story with you. I appreciate you being here. And as always, remember, folks, harden your hearts and open your minds, because this is Mind War.